Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Sunday service. For those of you who don't know us, my name is Nayaswami Devi, and this is Nayaswami Jyotish, and we serve as directors for Ananda throughout the world. And we've had a wonderful weekend here with all of you, and we welcome those who we haven't yet been with this weekend, and we're glad to share this time together. This is a very profound topic that we have today, and really quite moving, because we've just celebrated a few weeks ago Easter, which is really not understood deeply in the way it's celebrated by most Christians, I have to say, because as our Guru explained, really Easter is about the transformation of the soul. And yet there's a remarkable drama that took place at that time as well. Master said that the greatest miracle of love took place when Christ uttered those words on the cross, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." And this is such, many years ago, this is such an important statement. Many years ago, we were part of a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, and we went to the beautiful and simple garden where Christ delivered the Sermon on the Mount. And it's very simple, just a garden overlooking the Sea of Galilee. And there's a simple, at that time, just a simple outdoor pagoda. And there were many groups there from around the world, and everyone was uttering the Sermon on the Mount. And it was the most fabulous experience, because you could hear it in Chinese, Japanese, Italian, French, German, all the languages of the world simultaneously repeating the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the poor, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be known as the children of God. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. And it was as though he was still speaking those words in this moment. And that's the truth of any divine being. When Christ said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do," those words are still reverberating in this moment. And we just have to catch them in our hearts now and use them and live them in this time in which we live. And Christ's life, as we know the story, was not an easy life. It was a life of misunderstanding, persecution, tests. Well, what about your life? Misunderstanding, tests, recrimination, perhaps persecution. We all go through our tests. And in fact, when Christ's disciples said, "Lord, how can we be your disciples?" He said, "He who would be my disciple must take up his cross and follow me." Well, what is that cross that we have to take up? That cross is formed molecule by molecule, atom by atom, of our own past karma. We made that cross, and we created it. And what is bad karma? It's action, thoughts, words that are not in alignment with divine consciousness, with the will of God. And so every time we act out of attunement with God's presence, we build that cross that we have to bear. And yet, the law of karma is the mechanism. It's not just a kind of a law of physics, okay? I mean, there is a law of physics. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction, but it's so much more than that. The law of karma is God's teaching mechanism, created with love and wisdom for each one of us, individually and personally, so that we can learn how to stay in attunement with God. There used to be this game that the children would play, probably still do, where you hide something and the one person's out of the room and then they come back And all the rest of the students, when they try to find where it's hidden, if they're going in the wrong direction, all the students say, colder, colder, colder. And if they're going closer, all the students say, warmer, warmer. And then if, it's fun with children. And when they get really close, hotter, hotter, you're burning up. And then they find it. Well, that's the law of karma. That's how God teaches us. When we're going away from Him, we suffer. And He says, colder, colder, colder. And then when we start coming closer to alignment with Him, He's cheering us on. And we can move with freedom and move with joy. And so the cross that we have to bear, God, we create it, but through the law of karma, He places it on our shoulders so that we can learn. So if we start off by saying, I accept this, I want to learn, I need to expiate my karma. I need to find joy that has eluded me. And so in this passage that was read to us, Swamiji talks about the process of bearing the cross, which is another way of saying dealing with our karmic burdens. And that's what draws all the suffering in our life. Tests, pain, persecution, whatever it might be. Illness, misunderstanding. Nothing is random and nothing is arbitrary. I remember I had two friends growing up. One was a very wise girl and one was, I wouldn't call her foolish, but she didn't have the wisdom. And she was going through a period of bad health, the foolish friend. And we went to visit her in the hospital. And she was, why me? Why me? Why does this have to be happening to me? And I'm sure we've all felt that when we're going through tests. I don't deserve this. Well, never have that thought. Never have the thought you don't deserve this, because the law of karma is invariably accurate. And so this friend was saying, why me, why me? And my other wise friend, who just passed away earlier this year, we remained friends through all of childhood. She just looked at her and why me, why me? And she looked at her and she said, why not you? And it's that ability, so Swami gives us guides how to deal with our tests. The first is to accept that God placed that test on our shoulders. We created it, it's ours, but He put it there. So to recognize and say, okay, God, I'll follow you, I'll take up my cross, because that's the only way that I'll break through my bad karma and find inner freedom. And then the next step is to be grateful, to say, wow, I could have gone on for lifetimes never looking at this issue in myself, but through God's grace, He's healing me. He's saying, deal with this, understand it. But don't identify with it. That's so important with our bad karma. We think, oh, I'm a bad person. I did something wrong. Look how much I'm suffering. Don't identify with the mistakes that you've made. We had a friend some years ago, and Swami often gave this advice to people who were diagnosed with very serious illnesses. She was diagnosed with a terminal illness and was given but a few months to live. She went to talk with Swami Kriyananda. She was a wonderful devotee. And he said, do whatever medically is appropriate, but don't ever identify yourself as you are a person who has this disease. And in fact, he told her, don't tell other people, because that only reinforces the self-identification. And so she took, given a few months to live, she took that time and she just really changed her life, began meditating many hours every day, practicing energization many times a day, and really rededicated her whole life to the spiritual search. And those 3 months she was given to live turned into a year, and then 3 years, and then 7 years. And she used that time very, very well. First it was more about interiorizing her own consciousness, but then she had AIDS. But then she went around and spoke. She was a spokesman for AIDS education. and went to schools and won many awards for educating younger people about AIDS and so forth. So, and then she passed away, but we were asked to be the officiators at her funeral. Her astral ascension ceremony took place at Ananda Village. We've never had such a big ceremony. The entire temple, the entire dining room, all around, people whose lives she had touched. If she had taken that diagnosis and said, I have AIDS, I'm going to withdraw, I'm going to pull in here, and end of story, and I'll just wait till I die, none of those people's lives would have been touched and benefited. But she didn't identify with the illness, which is karma that came to her. And she just died with such a beautiful state of grace and joy and freedom. So again, when you have your karmic burden that you're dealing with, accept that it's from God. But be grateful, but don't identify with it. Take it impersonally. This is happening. You don't have to think it's happening to me. It's just happening. We look at the world around us and we can get really reactive. Oh my God, how can people act this way? How can they do this? But if you just say, this is happening today, what can I do about it? I can't change those people, but I can bring light into my own life, just as our friend did with her illness. I can change my own consciousness. And when enough people realize the power of changing their own consciousness, the world will be transformed. We need to remember that. The power of individual effort to find God. And then finally, in the reading that Swami gave, accept, be grateful, be impersonal. We don't have to think, why me, why me, why? It is. And there's the beautiful story from the life of Saint Bernadette of Lourdes. There's a beautiful movie of her life, the Song of Bernadette, is that what it's called? And at the end of her life, she had much suffering. She was a wonderful saint of Christianity. And there was another older nun in the monastery. And I love how they depict older nuns in monasteries, because I think they shave off their eyebrows and just make them very gaunt and, bitter. They did a good job with this woman. So she was jealous of Bernadette's, her joy, her purity, her love, her light. And when she was always trying to undermine her in all her efforts. And then one day this woman comes to her weeping, this old bitter nun, and she said, I've felt so much hatred and jealousy from you, but all you've ever given me back is sweetness and love. But I don't understand why you were blessed with the vision of the Virgin Mary. That was the story in her life. And I, who have sacrificed and sacrificed, I've received nothing. If you could show me some way that you have suffered. And Bernadette said, well, I can't. I haven't suffered. I'm not worthy. I don't know why Mary appeared to me. And the woman was weeping and upset, and then she said, oh, well, maybe I'll show you this. And she picked up her habit. There was a huge tuberculosis of the bone on her leg, terribly painful and huge. And the woman's face was just aghast, and she said, but I'm not suffering. There it was. But she wasn't identified with it. Why me, why me, why me? All she could think about was the love for God. And that's the last point Swamiji made in the reading we heard this morning. He said, ultimately, to find perfection through self-transcendence, we have to just seek God, love God, and understand that through this process, we are never alone. We could not do this transformation by ourselves. There's the beautiful story that has such spiritual inspiration. It's a little parable of a man walking along a path in the forest. And as he walks, it's a beautiful day and the trees are there. And he feels the presence of someone behind him. And he keeps walking and he keeps hearing these footsteps behind him. And he turns and there's no one there. And he keeps going, and with every step he takes, he hears these steps following him. And then finally he begins to understand, this is the presence of God. He's with me. He's walking right behind me on this path of life. And then as he continues his journey, he comes to a very difficult part of the path. And it's steep and it's hard to navigate, and it's the trees are blowing and the branches are hitting him, and he can hardly move forward. The wind is blowing with such force against him, and he turns around and there's not a second set of footprints. All he sees are his own. But he keeps going, he keeps going. Finally he gets through, breaks through the difficulties, and he's walking again easily. And again, he hears the steps behind him. And he turns, and he sees the second set of footprints. And he stops. And he says, Lord, where were you in that most difficult of times? And he feels within his own heart God's response. And God says, my child, whose footprints did you think those were in the times of trials? Those were my footprints, and I was carrying you through those tests. So remember, seek God, because He's always there. He's carrying us in moments we have no idea that He's there. We could tell you so many stories of tragedies averted and tests ameliorated just because of the presence of God, that walking unseen by our side. And it concluded, the quote from the Bhagavad Gita was something that Master quoted often, and we were speaking of it yesterday. Out of 1,000, Krishna says to Arjuna, one seeks me, and out of 1,000 who seek me, one perhaps finds me. But Master, in his inimitable strength and courage, says, our percentages are much better than that. So, meaning that those who follow the path of Kriya Yoga and discipleship to our great lineage, Babaji, Jesus, Lahiri, Sri Teshwar, and our Guru Deva, our percentages, not 1 out of 1,000 of those devotees, but many more. So, go for the goal. That which yesterday we were having some questions and answers, and I'm going to, well, I won't say your name, but someone said, I'm a newbie here. And then don't ever think of yourself as a newbie. You are, each one who comes to this path is an old soul. I don't think anyone whose live Master touches has not been seeking God for many incarnations. Remember that. You are not, this is not new. This is not the first time you, as Master said of Sri Teshwar, this is not the first time I found myself at those holy feet. This is not the first time you have found yourself at Master's holy feet. So seek Him. The world is an amazing distraction. And my hat goes off to living in, all of those of you who live in a place as intense as this area, with all the distractions and all the intensity. But if you can really keep your effort to seek God strong here, God will come and He'll carry you right through the traffic, right through the competitive people at work, right through all of it. He's always there. Gurudev is always there. And so ultimately we come, as Bernadette said, what tests, what karma? All I know is that I love God, and this life is all about finding myself united with that joy and that love. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, beloved God, Great Masters, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswar, and our beloved Guru, Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, humbly we bow to you all. O Divine Mother, may thy love shine forever on the sanctuary of our devotion. And may we be able to awaken thy love in all hearts. Om, peace. Amen. Go out with joy.